Brinae, I would love to start with the first question to you. There are so many ways that I feel like we could enter into this conversation, especially I'm thinking about the creative process that you went through to come to what you came to us with today. So could you talk about what were some of the first inklings of this piece for you, or what were some of the experiences that nudged you to this work?
This man right here. No, honestly, yeah, I mean, I've always loved Baby Laurence and admired him as an artist as a kid. And he was the type of artist that, you know, like when I was coming up, we still had Jimmy Slide, we still had Buster Brown, we still had, you know, a lot of those guys were still alive. And so I often would wonder, like, if he was still here, like, what would it be like? And that was just always, like, in the back of my head. And then over time, like, little people would say stuff, like Roxanne Butterfly used to hang with her, and she used to be like, something about the essence of you just makes me think about Baby Laurence. And I thought that was so bizarre to hear that, you know. I am influenced by men and women, but like my first learning of tap dance came through my father. So fast forward, you know, moved to Baltimore because, like I said, this guy right here, my husband, Sean, he got a position as the chair at Peabody and of the jazz studies. And he came up with this idea to, you know, put a proposal to the president about forming the Baltimore Jazz Collective. And part of the proposal was for each of us, members of the band, to reimagine music by a Baltimore artist and to, you know, compose our own original works. So the song For Baby, which when I was dancing with the band in the beginning, it just started there first. We were recording the album, and that was it. And then I went to an archival workshop that was organized by the Billie Holiday Center, which is a center inside of the Kennedy Krieger Schools at Hopkins at the UB Blake Center. And everybody was there interested in archiving their stories or different things and wanted to learn like the proper ways on how to, you know, archive things. And when it got to me, when it went around the room, they're like, so what are you interested in? I said, well, you know, I've been living here in Baltimore, and I'm very curious to know more about Baby Laurence living here, like people in the community in this hometown, like what stories can I find, what pictures, what videos that may exist, you know. So it kind of started there, and then I was asked to become a community arts fellow for the Billie Holiday team, the Billie Holiday Center, and joined like this team of archivists and scholars who were doing different research, you know, really aiming towards restoring Black Baltimore. It was like a reparations program. They got funding from the Mellon Foundation to do this, so they were interested in people in Baltimore who were focused on cultivating, preservation, and revisiting and kind of invigorating the community and, you know, just Black excellence in the arts.
So actually, so as you're talking about that, every time I see, this is the third time I've seen the piece, I see new things, and it seems to me that you are actually adding back to the archive. Was that part of your intention, or like how do you see your contribution to the archive through this piece?
Yeah, it's a living archive. So that's why we were playing with the element of having, you know, video, like playback in the moment, documenting and being able to, you know, see where do I fit inside of this? How am I adding to the legacy? Where's my legacy inside of all of this? How are we where's the intersections, you know, within the group, within the information that's coming? So we're kind of unpacking and working through all of that, which is why I like to call it an archival performative process.
Yeah. Well, so this actually, I would like to bring Nicholas in and maybe the two of you a little bit talking about, I'm thinking about the piece that was my man to start with, but you could talk about any of them, about the ways that you two work together to use this technology to project the images, create the music that then becomes sort of like the environment that you are all working in. So maybe you could just talk a bit about that process.
Yeah, well, Brinae was actually there when I very first created this kind of process and this idea, like 13, 14 years ago or something, like 15 years ago, a long time ago. And I, I think I was really, interested and curious about what she wanted to do with it, and then the implementation of video. So it was another process of like, do you think this is possible? Do you think this is possible? And then me trying to search for ways to make it happen. So it's a similar process to other things we've done with these kind of tap dance instruments, but it's just really, really fun to explore in all of these directions, because frankly, it's not something that tap dance gets to do a lot. And that has to do a lot with like funding and focus and intention. Other dance forms tend to get a lot more funding for different types of process and collaborations, and sometimes a university is involved, so you have the film department and the media department and the technology department. You have all these sources, and for us, sometimes it's a lot of YouTube.
It's very grassroots.
Yeah, from everything from like literally building the thing with our hands to the collaborations that happen within our community. And I mean, just the other day, Sean was saying like, wow, I thought jazz musicians were really entwined in each other's lives. Y'all are like really like entwined in each other's lives, because these stories hit us when we were babies and they changed our lives. These voices, these eyes, these stories, the words coming from their mouth changed our lives. So I think we're incredibly passionate about sharing this history. Obviously, you see us do it so often, but I don't think it's been done this way, in this sort of a creative way of like storytelling through multimedia. For us, it seems like a brand new process, and I'm just really excited to be a part of it. Hopefully I answered the question.
Yeah, Brinae, either one of you, how did you choose the videos or the voices or what was that process like?
Just, going through information, and the beautiful thing about the internet, it gives you more than what you asked for. so like, just digging through YouTube and then coming across, I've watched By Word of Foot, which is where That Was My Man, the clip of Bunny Briggs talking about Baby Laurence, and then also like saying how he was so far ahead that he reinvented the shim sham. And so I thought that was really cool. And I was just sitting, me and Sean were sitting at home just in a creative flow, listening to stuff and writing down ideas, and I was watching the clip, and he was like, play it back. And he was like, stop, play that back again. And then we kept hearing, That Was My Man. And he was like, play it back again. And I was like, what? And then he was like, that was my man. That was my man. He was like, what if you take this 3 and put something over it with a 4 and we go back and forth? And it was like, a challenge. So I was like, oh, okay. And then I said, we can totally revamp the shim sham altogether. And, and just kind of, I feel like, Baby Laurence just gave me permission to do that. So then there's also learning in my research that he used to sing. And so I started trying to imagine what was his voice like. They said he sang with the McKinney Cotton Pickers, so I started listening to music with that. Then they said he sang with the four buds, right? But then I couldn't find music by the Four Buds. I found music by the Four Buddies. So I was like, is this them? Is that, they were from Baltimore who sang doo-wop, so maybe this is them. And so, I came across this song called The Light, and it was like, okay, now I'm gonna reimagine that. So it's like I just found these different layers and add them, and then we just made the music.
Sean, I would like to bring you into this. You have clearly made significant contributions to this experience, and I'm wondering, you're a composer, you're a jazz musician. What was the process of making this? How does it compare to your previous musical composition processes?
Well, first of all, if you haven't noticed, Brinae is like a horticulturalist of art. Like she has the ability to take seeds and turn them into a garden that you just don't expect. And so for me in the past, I would just write songs that I heard about themes. But, just being with her and knowing her for the past 9 years, I see art a completely different way. And possibilities have opened up for me. And I'm just grateful to be along the ride, to be frank. And I just try to make sure that I have the right tools to be able to contribute to the process. Just like you mentioned, that was my man. About 2 weeks ago, we were having another one of our porch moments. I call them porch moments because we sit out on our porch and just dream. And she says, hey, there's a thing we're doing, and that was my man. Can you just write a line to it? And then she walks away. And so I take the idea as a mandate. And next thing I know, I'm sitting there like, okay, listening to it. And that's what you heard when we played the line with their feet. So it's an honor, really. I'm just trying to honestly just make sure that I can catch the seeds.
That's incredible. Wendel, can I ask you a question also about composition? A similar question, really, is how has working on this impacted the way that you create? But in particular, I'm thinking about Who is Baby Laurence, which is the piece that you were mixing, during the show. What was that experience like for you? Did you choose the sound clips? Did you, just talk a little bit about that, would you?
Sure. So the first thing is, so Brinae is one of my closest friends, as is Sean. And so pretty much when either of them call me and ask me to do something, I just say yes. That's that's the first thing. But I've been in Baltimore for, this will be my 29th year, and I had never heard of Baby Laurence until Brinae, asked me to be involved with this project, and I said yes. And so over the years, I've just watched it develop and grow, and so she'll have these new ideas and iterations. And so what you heard, the voices that you heard, we actually recorded about a month ago in my studio. And the voices that you're actually hearing are several of participants of the Baby Laurence Project process, some of who are here, some of who have been with us for other iterations. And so actually, now that I think about it, you were like, yeah, we want to come over and record some voices. And yeah, just record some voices, And I was like, great, come on over. So we recorded some voices. And she was like, yeah, I think it'd be really cool if we kind of put them together and play with them, we could sort of dance with them. And I was like, okay. So so I did that, and I was working on it. And I'm a producer, and I started thinking well, maybe I should put some instruments to it so that just in case the band would like to play it. And then I was like, I just got really excited, which is what always happens when Brinae or Sean brings an idea, apparently to anyone, so that's really what you were hearing. I had no idea what it would end up as, but it's just such a great sort of platform to jump off of and dive into exploring.
What I'm hearing is we all need friends like you guys. BZ, I would love to hear you say a bit more about your part in this process. I am just so captured by the images that show up on that screen. I'm way back there, yet I can read what's on these filing cabinets, on these books, and then as I see the dancers on the walls, how do you think about your role in this and your contribution to the project?
Yeah, so I guess it's been 3 years? 4 years. 4 years that I've been documenting Brinae and the Baby Laurence Legacy Project. And so it's evolved a lot, because originally it was just me actually documenting the shows and the process and the rehearsals, and where eventually it kind of built out to us developing this docu-series that we're still, everything we're shooting is all going to be a part of that. So each time that we kind of take the piece to somewhere else and there's different people involved, all of that is kind of creating this map. Like you see the map on there, those things are connected to kind of the structure that we're hoping to develop with this docuseries. And so for me, like, it feels like I'm literally tracing Brinae's steps, like the name, Baby Laurence Legacy Project, tracing steps. And so going around, and whether it's like traveling to different cities with her or literally just like shooting her feet as she goes across the floor, that kind of like recurring theme. And so it's cool as kind of this meta, being able to share that process with you all. And then I think something you were saying earlier about like the archive part is that in this process, it's been, you've shared like sometimes it's difficult to find certain things on Baby Laurence. There's not that much besides that short documentary. And so making sure that we do due diligence in documenting this process and having conversations with everyone involved. So like some of those voices were recorded from I guess a month ago, but the voices you hear in anthropology are from when we were back here at the Pillow for the Pillow Lab in
December 24?
December 24. And so showing how we're kind of like overlaying these different elements from past conversations and bringing it in, and it kind of just continues to evolve.
Yeah, I mean, I think a significant takeaway from this conversation, from seeing the show, is that the layers, there are so many layers. There's music and dance, there's live, and there's mediated, and things are just constantly getting layered on top of each other. And so I'm curious, Brinae, what were your hopes and dreams for an audience to take away? Is there something that we're supposed to like see and grab onto? Are you inviting us in to kind of have our own experience of that which you are offering? What do you want for us?
Well, I hope that you are able to walk away feeling like a deeper sense of humanity. To use Baby Laurence as an example or a roadmap of understanding the complexities of what it means to be a human being, period. Not just because he was a black man and trying to understand black life. Like, everybody doesn't get that because you can't understand what you don't know. But we understand pain. We understand mental, health and illness. We understand joy. We understand, frustration. We can understand those things and also participate in it. So that's why it's so, it's also the tradition of the call and response, the audience being engaged in that process is very important. And so, I love playing with the idea of being in the past, present, and future all at the same time, because I just believe that it just goes like this instead of like that, So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you all so much for your work on the stage, for this conversation, for your continued efforts on this. It's really quite incredible. Thank you. Thank you all for staying.